But first of all, let's just turn to, first of all, the Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation.
For us here at GBC, we provide equal airtime to all presidential at GBC, equal airtime. Just say that we welcome everybody, especially our special guest for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
much. I was about to mention the name of who we're meeting this evening, this encounter, and to support it. This is something that we've been doing since 2010, when Star Ghana has provided support. And we're grateful to the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK government for providing the funding. We think that this evening encounter is very important, not just because of the opportunity it enables us to interact. Usually, we will not have the occasion to have this kind of interaction and engagement with the candidates. We have focused this year's encounter around access to social services, because we think the fundamental basis for transforming this country will be through access to the focus area of the Development Office. And we look forward to it.
Thank you so much for the remarks. Now that you are done with the remarks, let's get to know who our candidate is. John Dramani Mahama was born on the 29th. Mahama, a prominent rice farmer, was a member of parliament for his first president. Jane Aton received Tamale, where he taught history at Ghana Secondary School in 1983. He enrolled Ghana Secondary School in 1983. He enrolled in social psychology in 1988. From 1991 to 1996, he worked as the Information, Culture and Research Officer at Country Office. The sixth, Mr. John Dramani Mahama entered Ghanaian politics. He joined the National Democratic Congress NDC, and being an eloquent champion of the re-elected in the elections of 2000 and 2004. During his time, he was appointed a Deputy Minister for Communications in 1997, became Minority Minister for Communications in 1997, became Minority Parliamentary Deputy Minister for Communications in 1997, became Minority Parliamentary spokesperson of the National Economic Management Team, a found national population. Continuing to expand his interest and involvement in international affairs in 2003, Mr. Mahama became a member of the Pan-African Parliament, serving as the chairperson of the West African Caucus. In 2002, he was appointed the Director of Communications for the NDC. In 2005, he was additionally appointed a Minority Spokesman for Foreign Affairs. That same year, he served as a member of the team of international observers selected to monitor Zimbabwe's presidential elections. In 2008, Mr. Mahama was nominated as running mate to Professor John Evans Atta Mills. The NDC won the 2008 elections, and John Mahama was sworn in as Vice President of Ghana in 2009. While serving as Minister for Communications, Mr. Mahama was also the chairman of the National Communications Authority and played a key role in the stabilization and transformation of Ghana's telecom sector. In July 2012, he succeeded his boss, President John Evans Atta Mills, who passed away on July 24, 2012, and elected in December 2012 as President of Ghana for the first 4-year term. He thus made political history by becoming the first Ghanaian head of state to have been born after Ghana's declaration of independence on 6th of March 1957. Soon after his investiture, the opposition New Patriotic Party, led by the 2012 presidential candidate Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, with running mate Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and the party chairman Jacob Otanka Obichebe Lamte, challenged the results of the elections in the famous election petition suit. The petition was heard by 9 Supreme Court justices, with Justice William Atuguba as president. After 8 months of hearing, the Supreme Court on August 29, 2013 dismissed the petition by a 5-4 majority decision. Mr. Mahama is a prolific writer, and his book, My First Coup d'etat and Other True Stories from the Lost Decades of Africa, published in July 2012, has won international praise for describing a world of love, fear, faith, despair, loss, Longing and Hope Despite All Else. He has also written essays which have been published in the Ebony, Huffington Post, the New York Times, and The Root. In 2016, Mr. Mahama became the first sitting president to exit power after his first term when he lost to the then opposition candidate, Nana Akufo-Addo. He contested the 2020 elections again and lost to the incumbent. Mr. Mahama is the presidential candidate for the opposition National Democratic Congress, NDC, for the 2024 general elections. He is married to Mrs. Lodina Mahama and they have 5 children.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put our hands together to welcome our guest for this evening. And shall we please stand to welcome him? Let's be on our feet to welcome him. Good evening, Your Excellency.
Hi, George. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you.
Good. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Just a quick run through. You have 20 minutes to speak to Ghanaians, after which we'll sit down and talk briefly. Then we'll leave the rest for our audience here in the studio.
Okay.
So your 20 minutes starts now.
All right.
Then please take your seats.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, our audience, and thank you, Ghanaians watching from all over the country. I'm happy to be back here after so many years. The first time I came to GBC was as a young intern from the School of Communication Studies. And I have a nostalgic feeling when I see all these old studios. Not too much has changed there. Well, thank you very much. 7th December is a very critical day for Ghana. And as we do every 4 years, since we adopted constitutional democracy under the 1992 Constitution, we have elections. We've held 8 elections, and this will be the 9th. But this is no ordinary election, because it comes at a time when our nation is going through a very severe economic crisis. Actually, not only a crisis of the economy, but even a crisis of governance. There are several issues in governance that have cropped up. Low trust in the judiciary, and as you recently saw, the impasse between the judiciary and parliament, and many other issues of governance. And so this election is critical because the next government must take very critical and bold decisions in terms of both our governance and our economy. As part of the government that started the constitutional review process under Professor Mills of blessed memory, and we pushed it to a point where a citizen of this country took the whole process to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was not able to determine the matter until late in 2015. And because it was an election year, the following year, we decided to leave it for the next administration to continue. Unfortunately, it hasn't moved forward. And so one of the things we intend to do urgently when we come into office is to push the issue of constitutional review so that we can clearly define some of the clauses that we have in the Constitution so that we don't always have to run to the Supreme Court for interpretation. We have a crisis in our economy because we have a twin problem. In all the previous times that we've gone to the International Monetary Fund for assistance, it has had to do only with stabilizing the macroeconomic environment. And often you have to go to the IMF for policy credibility in order that the partners and the credit rating agencies and everybody who has an interest in investing in Ghana is certain that the fiscal reform decisions that you take are things that you intend to implement. Unfortunately, this time we have a twin problem. We have macroeconomic instability, and then at the same time we have a problem of unsustainable debt. I believe that this challenge or these problems are self-inflicted. We could have avoided these problems. We could have managed to keep our economy resilient and buoyant, even in the face of the adverse conditions that the whole world faced. And that is the difference between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Our economies were about the same. Ghana was a larger economy than Cote d'Ivoire, but better economic management meant that they were able to weather the storm much better than we did. We could foresee that in any developing economy or middle-income economy, definitely there will be challenges that you face, and we call them headwinds or external shocks. And so one of the things that we started to do was to build the buffers. I'll talk about that later and explain what I mean to you. But let me give the baseline so that we can understand the conversation as I go forward. At the end of our term in office, when we handed over to the MPP, we had a debt to GDP ratio of 55.6%. I'm sure many of you will be surprised, because you remember that when I was president, the MPP kept pushing the narrative that we're borrowing too much. But our debt to GDP ratio was 55.6%, that's all. And when I come to talk about their record, they borrowed until our debt to GDP went all the way to 104%. And as I speak to you, we are just at about 87, between 85 and 87%. And the adjustments we are making together with the debt exchange means that we are aiming that by 2028, we should bring the debt to GDP below 60%. We had a credit rating of B-. And if you know that we currently are junk status, you understand what I mean. When they say your economy is at junk status, it means it's baller. Your economy is at baller. And then we had a budget deficit of 6.1%, which is a fairly good budget deficit, because the Fiscal Responsibility Act says that you should keep the budget deficit below 5%. And so we had a budget deficit of 6.1%, just above the 5%. And then we had a stable currency, which had a depreciation rate annually of 7%. We had industry growing at 4.3% and manufacturing subsector growing at 7.9%. We also had single-digit unemployment rate at 8.4%. And the IMF and Economic Intelligence Unit predicted that in the year following, which was 2017, because of the work we had done in 2016 in stabilizing the economy was going to grow by 8%. And so that 8% growth that we saw in 2017 had absolutely nothing to do with the MPP administration. Indeed, by the time they read their budgets and started to implement, there's no way they could have influenced that growth. And yet they tout it as one of their achievements. And just imagine that even after 2017, subsequent years, the growth started to go down. When they started managing the economy themselves, just look at the growth chart. It went down to 6-point-something, to 5-point-something, until it eventually ended up at 0. Now, during our period in office, we realized that we needed to find new sources of revenues. And the traditional pillars of our economy were the oil and gas sector, the cocoa sector, the gold sector, and non-traditional exports. Non-traditional exports are dependent totally on the private sector, and so it has continued to do well. Of course, you also have remittances. Remittances comes to about 4 billion a year, and that has nothing to do with government's performance. But the other sectors, in terms of the gold sector, in terms of cocoa, and in terms of oil and gas, you have to create a favorable environment for those sectors to thrive. Unfortunately, under 8 years of the MPP administration, the reverse has been the case. And so when we're in office, we created a good environment, and so a lot of investors came into the oil and gas sector. That is, by the time we left office, we had brought on stream 2 new oil fields In 2010, our first oil field started, which was Jubilee, and that was the only field we had until I came into government. By the time I left government, we had added a 10th field, and we had added the ENI Sankofa field. And so this increased Ghana's oil and gas production. And it was good for the economy because we got more gas to reduce our dependence on crude oil for electricity generation. And then also we got more oil to be able to bring in foreign exchange. We incentivized the cocoa sector, and so by the time we left office, we exported almost 1 million tons, 967,000 metric tons approximately. That brought in almost $2 billion into the fund, into the country. Aside from that, we created buffers in order to make the economy resilient. We established the stabilization fund, and if you remember, during COVID, when government had no money at all to start the fight against COVID, we reminded them that there was money in the stabilization fund, and the money in the stabilization fund is supposed to be used when there are emergencies. And so they took $270 million or so out of the stabilization fund. We also left money in the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, which we're going to start and use as our sovereign wealth fund. And we left about $250 million in that fund. We also established a sinking fund, which was to be used to retire debt that was oncoming. And so the money that we left in the sinking fund is what Ken Ofori-Atta used in September the next year when the Kufuor Eurobond became due. That is what he used to offset it. If we had not set that money aside, it would have created a crisis because government would have had to look immediately for that kind of money to be able to do that. And so when they exhausted all these buffers, the sinking fund, they used it. Stabilization fund was used. Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, they used it. They did not replenish the sinking fund. And yet they went on a borrowing spree, borrowing almost $3 billion every year, most of which was going into consumption instead of into infrastructure and production. And that's why in a 5-year period, they borrowed almost $11.5 billion. And that is what has created the unsustainable debt that we have. But it raises issues of conflict of interest because the finance minister had Data Bank, which was his own bank, being the broker for government borrowing. And a conflict of interest arises there because if you are benefiting from borrowing, of course you'll be interested in borrowing more so that your company can make more money. So currently we have a crisis of our economy, an unsustainable debt, and high inflation. Inflation went up to 54%, it's now down to 23%, I think. And then also, like I said, the debt went up as a ratio of GDP to 104%, and is now at about 85%. We have a depreciating currency, which end of 2016 was at about 4 cedis and is currently at 17 cedis. And so everything is wrong with our economy. And the economy has linkages to everything. And so once the economy is not doing well, it affects healthcare, it affects education, it affects agriculture, it affects sports and every other sector. It affects the energy sector. Indeed, the energy sector is a ticking time bomb. We resolved Doomsaw. We introduced the energy sector levy to provide enough cash to be able to pay for our generation because the Doomsaw was caused by 2 things. 1, a generational shortfall, and 2, a legacy financial debt. And so introducing the ESLA, we made sure that more money was going to come in to be able to pay for generation. And then also, because we brought in Car Powership and also Ameri, we brought in almost 500 megawatts that solved the generational shortfall. So in 2016, I want to place it on record, and President Akufo-Addo should not misinform people again. In 2016, there was no load shedding. Nobody had load shedding. And so Doomsaw was solved long before he came into office. Again, he has sown the seeds of Doomsaw, and we're feeling it already. Our lights are being put off because the energy sector debt has ballooned to almost $2 billion. we negotiated the Millennium Challenge Compact, which was supposed to make our electricity distribution system more efficient. And part of it was to be applied for the PDS program, if you remember PDS. When they negotiated the PDS company to come and take over the downstream distribution of electricity, they used frontmen. And so the shares were initially given to the frontmen. And then when the president's family wanted to redistribute it to whoever they wanted or to themselves, the frontmen refused and they quarreled. And then that quarrel led to America withdrawing $190 million, which we were supposed to use for the electricity distribution system. And so since then, Electricity Company of Ghana's losses, technical and commercial losses, have gone up to 32%. There's no electricity company in this world that can survive with a 32% technical and commercial loss. That means they are unable to collect enough money. Apart from that, technical losses are things that you have to put in engineering to solve. But a big percentage of it is that you supply electricity, but you're unable to collect your money. And that's why we needed private sector intervention to improve the efficiency of collection. Because they quarreled, America took $190 million away. And so as I said, ECG is making huge losses. The last time I had 10 billion CD loss, another 6 billion CD loss. If we continue like this, our energy sector is going to crash. And so Akufo-Addo has sown the seeds for Dumso again, and already Dumso is here. Sunon Asogli has shut down because they owe them $270 million. They owe other operators who are threatening to shut down their power systems. And so, but for the fact that some of the power stations are reasonable, they are keeping the power system on even though the debt is mounting. Aside from that, ENI that supplies gas to us has reduced their supply of gas significantly because Ghana is not paying for the gas that it is taking. And so they've reduced the supply of gas significantly. When we set up the gas supply under ENI, we supported it with a World Bank guarantee. Because of non-payment, they have drawn down on the World Bank guarantee. They've drawn down until it's left with $50 million. If they draw down on that $50 million, then it means Ghana is in default to the World Bank, and the consequences will be very difficult. So they've put this country on the brink, and something must give. After such severe mismanagement of the country, I find it strange that they have the temerity to ask us to applaud them and to even vote for them again to come and continue the mess that they have caused. And I think that Ghanaians must know the full extent of what has happened. Nothing is working in this country. Everything has gone haywire. It has even affected the Black Stars. The Black Stars have always been the Black Stars. I mean, we've all been proud of the Black Stars. And you can count on them to score when it matters. Today, look at the Black Stars. So sad. You know, even Sudan, we're in the same group as Sudan. Sudan played all their home matches away because there's a war in Sudan. And Sudan has qualified. Black Stars is out. And so the time has come for Ghanaians to make a change. And I can smell the wind of change coming. I can tell that Ghanaians appreciate what we did when we were in government. A lot of propaganda made Ghanaians not know that we were managing things well. They said that life was hard. They were going to come and reduce electricity prices. They were going to come and reduce petrol prices. They were going to come and reduce the cost of food because they were going to grow so much food that, you know, the price of food will come down. Today is the reverse. The price of all these things have gone up. Petroleum has gone up, you know, currency is depreciating, you know, the price of kenke has gone up, you know. Kenke used to be 50 pesos and 1 CD. Today it's 5 CDs and 7 CDs. And for a person like me, I probably might eat 2 balls or 3 balls. And so today, if I eat 3 balls of kenke, that's 15 cedis. And then 1 chinam is 20 cedis. So you're talking about 35, 40 cedis just to have a meal of kenke. And so if a person has to have 3 square meals a day and you're spending 35 cedis on every meal, I mean, you can imagine what the, what do you call it, the minimum wages, far less. I mean, there's no way. And that is a single individual, not to talk about a family. And so the time has come to make a change. NDC has a lot of programs, and in 20 minutes I cannot talk about all of them. But one of the major things is that we become a high-cost point for business, high-cost destination for business, because this government likes the easy way out. When you face a crisis like this, you must raise revenue and reduce expenditure. But they are raising revenue and raising expenditure. And so, I mean, you can see some of the waste and the things that they do. I mean, recently I heard that, but you're going out of government, how many days to leaving office? You're buying new Land Cruisers. For who? You know. But that is this government for you. The president, within a 9-month period, spent 69 million Ghana cedis on foreign travel. And so these are the kinds of things. We need to cut expenditure. But at the same time, we must reduce the taxes so that we become a favorable destination for investment. Today, foreign direct investment or businessmen who want to invest in West Africa are going to Cote d'Ivoire and to Benin instead of coming to Ghana. And that's why we're saying we'll scrap some of the levies, like e-levy. It's discouraged people from paying with their mobile money. They rather go and cash out and pay cash because they would avoid the 1.5% tax. And we told them this, they didn't listen. And so some of those taxes are things that we'll take out. The betting tax, I mean, there are no jobs, so the boys get a little money here and there from betting tax. Then you go and take 10% out of it. And so those ones, so COVID has come and gone. Why are you taxing us for COVID? We're the only country in this world that is still being taxed for COVID. And you know,